there anything else that I missed in terms of concerns? I've written feedback start here. Okay, I don't know what my notes mean. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my, hang on. No, that's not what I'm going to do. Right. I'm going to start, Richard. So we've already heard a little bit about your project. I read the document that you sent. I'm going to share that in a second with these guys. And what I will say was really interesting, because what you did was answer the questions that I set as headings last time, which aren't the questions the Arts Council asked for. And I think that's probably my fault, because I promised that I would send out a whole bunch of stuff and I didn't. But what it does mean is that this session is actually really useful, because what we're going to do is we're going to transpose what you wrote, we're going to talk about it, and then we're going to translate it to answer the questions that actually appear in Grantium. So what that does for the rest of you is it creates a two-step thing, which actually might be easier to take the pressure off having to do the Arts Council application, because if you're ever like me, like just getting started is really scary. So what you do is you answer the questions that I set, you just splurge those, and then you translate it into a speak later. So that might be a process that makes it slightly less scary. So my main feedback, and this is very unhelpful to you guys, but I will make it helpful. My main feedback for you, Richard, was I didn't know what you were asking for. So I didn't know what the project that you were actually going to undertake included, like what the activity was. I think that was my main feedback, actually. And then I had some other things about like your fees and your budget. So like balancing between cost and value.
That was completely made up.
It's fine. We can talk about that. And then you've mentioned some really interesting international groups, but I don't know how you're connected to them. And it just sounded like you pulled stuff out of thin air, which I know that you haven't, because I can tell from the way that you've talked about something else how you might know those people. But it's really important to justify anything that you make. So, for example, when I first applied for funding for my debut play Coconut, I name checked Nikesh Shukla, who is like an award-winning writer, and then backed it up with a tweet that I had that he'd sent me. So I was like, I'm not just pulling names of random famous brown people out to support my application. I've actually got communication with them. Yes. So that's the main feedback that I had, that it has to be really specific what you're asking for. And I think for everybody who's in this space, like the fact that you don't necessarily know what you want to ask for, that's like the first step. So you've got obviously what your project is, but then also what are they funding? So is it an R&D, like I said to John? Is it a public performance, which is obviously on Zoom right now? Is it a bit of R&D mixed in with a bit of like organisational development? Because that might work for you, Lee, like, because actually the Arts Council give like a lot of money every year to organisations to like upskill themselves, to buy new computers, whatever you can think of, there's a way of justifying it. So really work out specifically what the activity was. And I didn't, from what I read, Richard, I didn't get a handle on that. Does that feel fair as feedback?
Fair. It's like being naked in here, but everybody. But
the safe space, and it will be, and it's useful as well. Because remember, those first applications are really, your first drafts they're pretty raw, aren't they? So. Yeah, absolutely right. It's good. You don't need to be perfect on your first draft.
Yeah, and it's one of the big babies rather than the little babies. So, well, it's basically if you said to me, really, what do you want? I'd like to get that project finished, and it needs a bit of R&D. and it then hopefully will be something that will be on the stage. I mean, it's as simple as that. But I think with an Arts Council application in mind, I've brought in community, I've brought in international, I've brought in also, but it's basically R&D to get the thing together. The reason it isn't, there's two reasons it isn't finished, one which is awful and one which is like everybody. When I got the first draft done, I was burgled, and it actually disappeared for a while until I found a copy of what I'd already written on it. So wow. Thankfully, I've discovered a PDF that had gone somewhere else, and thank goodness it did. But the other thing is, it's a bit complicated. It involves a little bit more research and development. I'd love to workshop it. I'd love to get somebody to help with the musical side of it. So it is R&D essentially, as what the project is about.
Okay, which I think for right now during our COVID times is perfect, because the new guidance really is about what can you do right now, how can you pay yourself and pay other artists to work now. And I think finishing the project is like that's a legitimate goal, because sometimes, as we all know, work takes a very long time to be made, and in cases of wanting musical elements or things that require a lot of research, it's a legitimate ask for, I need financial assistance in order to make this happen. It's not just me sitting at home writing an autobiographical monologue that, you know, once it's done, I'm going to put a bow on it and sell it to a theatre. Like, not all projects are that simple. And actually what you want to do is enrich the cultural landscape. And in order to do that, Arts Council need to give you money. So that's how we sort of, like, once you decide what you want, that's how we start to build the narrative of what you're asking for. The community stuff, I think, like I hear why that's important because of the session that you attended that I did and the emphasis that I put on that, but also because it's this idea of like the fear that Arts Council only gives money to relevant projects. And there is a way of showing relevance without scrambling or drawing attention away from the artistic journey. So there is the project, which is the play that you want to finish writing, and then there is everything that goes around it. And whilst that's really important, what you want to do is not draw money away from the artistic product in order to build a narrative that you're going to do all of this community-based stuff, which I know sounds contradictory. Like, it needs to be embedded, but what you need, it needs to not be the main focus. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you're making me think about the project I'm on at the moment, actually, which is basically, well, there's a finished product, almost done, but it was pitched into a community that wanted to support artists at the moment, and also needed some kind of entertainment in a kind of social media or a digital way. So it was linked community, but it's the thing I'm actually thinking about in the next 2 weeks, about how Thurrock as a community gets the most out of the project. Now it's the R&D and putting it together is there. So I've been through this process a little bit, or I'm still going through the process of how you link something you're making with the community. I mean, there are about 10 other people who've got money to do other things. So what I'm trying to do is link into that now in this August, so that the whole thing comes together. So perhaps that's a little bit of an example for how I should approach the other project, the bigger project, the Arts Council project.
I mean, yes and no. The difference is with the other project, it's finished. So you're now thinking about its performative value and how a performance project becomes important to the community that it's embedded in, right? So they're two separate but really great examples of how to apply for funding. So for that finished product, I would apply for a project grant that was specifically for a performance, a community embedded, a performance with community embedded activity, right? That serves and supports the people that it's made for. The project that you sent to me is very much, I would treat as an R&D with the goal to have a finished product by the end of the year. So you would apply for the money now, and then you'd spend 6 months working with a group of artists. You might spend time at the beginning writing little sections of scripts, bringing them together, and then you spend a week on Zoom playing, or a week socially distanced playing, and then you would take all of the things that you learn in that space away and use that information to rewrite the piece, remake the piece, and by December 31st, you're going to have a working draft.
Okay.
Yeah, and then all of that community stuff and those outreach examples that you gave that we're going to delve into, what they then do is, because you've done that work already, that supports your application, but in the background, because it's really about you finishing the work, and it's about you as an artist who recognizes that art doesn't exist in a vacuum, that it's influenced by lots of different people, but that's on the back burner for now. Does that make sense to everyone else? And to yourself, obviously, Richard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the story that you're telling. With the other piece, you're telling the story of like a community who wants to access a performance. Here you're telling the story of you as a playwright dedicating your time and money to paying artists to help you to finish this piece.
Okay, that's clear.
Yeah? Does that make sense to everyone else? Sweet. Okay, shall we dive in? Right, I'm going to share my screen and do this. Okay. By the way, everything that you need to fill out an application is available online. So this is the how to apply to £15,000 grant and under. There's a whole document on how to do that question by question. Easy reads, audio versions, and access support. So anyone who has any kind of like disability or neurodiversity, it's not heavily advertised, but if you need someone to help you write an application, the Arts Council will give you up to £300 a day to pay someone to do that for you. And that might be as simple as, which is not simple at all, but it might be a case of you sit down. Okay, so for example, you have dyslexia and you really struggle articulating what you want to say in a coherent manner, and obviously you have dyslexia, so it's difficult to type what you want to say. So you might sit down with an access support worker and be like, this is everything that you need to know about my project. Can you help me turn it into an Arts Council application? And Arts Council will give that person up to £300 a day to do that. So that is very good to know if you are neurodiverse in any way.
I didn't know that at all, Guleraana. It's incredible.
Yeah, you just have to ask. So that all that information is there, including, if I realize you can't see me, so I'm just pointing randomly for no reason. But that's just to say that that is all there. Right, this, oh, don't do that. That's not helpful. Right, this is the easy peasy A session that I did last time, which had, oh, I've forgotten her name. It's right, ignore me, doesn't matter, it's not relevant. This is what I would like to do with us today. By the way, all of these notes I've stolen from the Mercury in Colchester, but mainly because they're exactly what the advice that I would give you as well. It just saved me from having to type them out because someone had already done it. Right, project grants. This is, can you see this document here? Great. I'm going to scroll through the questions and then we're going to go through what Richard sent me and we're going to translate them. But I think it's really good to get an overall picture of how big and arduous it is before we start, not to put you off.
If you do it, are you actually really doing that? What I'm thinking is, will my application be finished by the time you finish?
No. No, it won't.
Oh, what a shame.
So this is, please give us a short summary of your project. We'd like to know what your project is, what will happen, who it's aimed at. 600 characters is nothing, guys. So small. So this is why the Mercury recommend that you do this last. I think there is merit in trying to tackle this question first, just because it's what and who, and a little bit to how as well. And then it's just really nice to have that in your head before you start writing the whole thing. But the big tip here is, do not put anything in this question. Sorry. Do not put anything in the rest of the application that doesn't appear in this section here. So if you fail to mention that you're going to be working with the English National Opera in this section, and then you bring it up later, for some reason, that's just going to do you a massive disfavor, right? They want to know that you can succinctly talk about all elements of your project in 600 characters right at the top. Tell us the amount you're applying for. You'll have to work that out. Little note, you have to do a preliminary application before you do the application on Grantium, and they will want to know the amount that you're applying for. So don't do what I do, which is attempt to write your entire application in one go without having done the budget, and then you have to enter some arbitrary number into the preliminary stage, just because it makes life difficult. Okay, project start date, really simple. Actually not that simple. Make sure that there's at least 2 months between the date that you submit and the project start date, and that's because it takes at least 6 weeks for ACE to make a decision, plus another 3 weeks for your money to come in. So they want to know that you have balanced your timeline, so you're not frantically going like, ah shit, I need money and my project starts next week, because Arts Council will not fund any activity that's already taken place. So you either need to fudge your timeline, or you need to accept that if you've already started rehearsals or you've already started researching, you're not going to get paid for that. And your project end date does not end when your final performance ends. It ends at least a month after that, because that's how long it will take you to balance your budget and do your evaluation. Okay, everyone with me so far? Great. So tell us about you or your organization's relevant work and experience. Pretty self-explanatory. Tell us more about your project and what you want it to achieve. So this is where knowing what you actually want to do and why it's important is important. So if it's an R&D, you plan on dissecting the script, working with actors, making up new songs. Why? Because you want to finish the project. And it says including the ideas behind your project. So this is if there is any issues, or if it's a historical piece, or if there's any kind of thing that's newsworthy, you pop it in there. Tell us how this project will help to develop your work. I mean, that's really basic. If it's going to mean that you have a credit on your CV, I would put that in. If it means that you're going to develop your network of artists, I would put that in. All that stuff is super, super relevant. Okay, who else is involved? Artist, creative, or museum specialist. Museum specialist, I mean, you can be really super loose with this, okay? If there's anyone at an institution that is supporting your work, so I'll give you an example. When we made Santi Naz, we had a history consultant who is Eleanor Newbegin, and she's the head of BA history at Surras University. I met her through a different project that I was doing, and I just cheekily went, yo, Eleanor, can you read my script and maybe give me a few notes on whether it's historically accurate? And she was like, yeah, mate, that's fine. Which means I get to put the University of SOAS as a project. It's not a partner, it's an artistic partner, right? Which immediately bumps up your credibility. The fact that you've got a world-leading institution supporting the work that you're making, it doesn't matter how big or small their contribution is, that is going to mean a lot when that person picks up your application. And remember last time I said that it might not be a theatre person reading your application. So any kind of like name or high profile person that you, or institution that you can get into it, so when they read it, they're like, oh, okay, yeah. And some eyebrows are raised, that's what you're aiming for. Right. Public engagement. Who will engage with your project? Think about the audiences or the people who will take part, and we'll talk about that when we get there. This used to be 1 or 2 big questions, and now they split it into 3 of 1,000 characters. 1,000 characters is nothing, guys. I always struggle on this because I'm like, I have too many things to say. Do bear in mind you can fudge it in Grantium and go up to 1,200 characters, but it's still not enough to say what you want to say. How will people engage with the project, and what experience do you want them to have? This is a really tricky question, and we'll get to it when we get to it. And then this is tell us how you will make sure your project reaches people. That's basically marketing. And there is a knack to it, and I'll explain that. This is what it says it is. So how many people are going to benefit from the project? So this is the artist. So everyone on your team. Participants, there is a participants, I'm going to find, right, audience and participants. Participants tend to be taking part in additional work outside of the show itself, whereas the audience is anyone who comes to see it. So what that means is if you're running any workshops or you've got any talkbacks, that's your participants. And then your audience is people who are going to see it live. Broadcast online is writing is like if you were to do PR and you were on BBC London talking about your show, or BBC Essex, how many people listen to that show? How many people read your tweets? If you write a blog, how many people are going to read that? I mean, you can add up that number to a really, really high number. Like the Asian Network, I think has, the big debate on the Asian Network has something like 250,000 listeners, right? And every time I do PR for a show that I've worked on, if it's a brown show, we'll go on the Asian Network. So that number can be extortionate and they won't question it. But don't be adding like 1 million in, because that's just crazy. But like imagine like loads of people go on to London Live to talk. We had both Maddie and Maddie, who was the writer and the director of Lady Killer, went on London Live. And like a lot of people went to London Live as well. So you can get those, you can get a sense of who might pick up about your show and what their broadcast figures are and just whack them in there. I mean, we'll do that in a minute. Okay, income, support in kind, budget. Have you managed budgets before? All really big questions, but really easy ways to answer them. And then tell us about you and your partner's recent experience. This is why it's really good to have strong partners on board, because if you guys have never done applications, so you've got no track record. So if you partner with somebody who has an excellent track record, this is where you can wax lyrical about everything that they've achieved. So when the first time I applied for Coconut, basically this was just all about Ovalhouse, and then a little bit about me and the Thelmas at the end. And a partner is really, really loose terminology. So it just means they're supporting it. So for example, if the Queens were to offer to support a project that you were doing, that, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Doug, but you can list them as a partner, right? Without there having to be like a massive outcome of that. So it's all about those, making the connections and then really, really bigging them up. And for example, say for those of you who might who might decide that you want to work with a high profile actor, I'm stopping myself because that might not count actually. Ignore I said that. Right, planning to date. Bear in mind, you cannot be paid for anything that you've already done. So always push your timeline down. So if you've already like done all the marketing, but you want to be paid for it, just bump your marketing down. The only caveat there is make sure that you don't have it happen really quickly, because then whoever's reading it is going to look at your timeline and be like, that will not work. This person cannot achieve those things that quickly. So it's a really big balance of what you can get away with in terms of prep work and how much you can be paid for that versus how quickly is your project, or how much time are you giving your project? Does that make sense? And then on Grantium, you basically have to enter line by line dates on when your project activity will happen. So your project might start on the 1st of September, and my first line on 1st of September might be director to contact all potential creatives. Right? And that will last 2 weeks, the hiring process. So you put that in for 2 weeks. And that's basically how you break it down. And then it's evaluation. Cool. I can only see 3 faces. So give me an indication of how overwhelming or not that was.
It's good. The only thing I'm thinking of that is it possible to have a copy of this, which you said is the Mercury's?
No, so this is this template is mine. You're more than welcome to have that.
It's yours. Sorry.
The notes that I'm reading, yeah, I can probably share those.
Because I began my application on whatever it was, one of the other things that was mentioned, the kind of, I think it's like Grantium is, but I didn't have enough time to complete that by any means. So this just looks to me as if a really helpful thing to get the application to its next stage.
Yeah, it's basically just a Word document with all the questions and the character count, because Grantium crashes, for me anyway, on my Mac almost every 5 minutes. So I like to write out the entire application on a Word doc so then I can copy and paste. And that means I don't lose work and have a breakdown every time I do an application.
Richard, also in the emails, this is for everyone, but in the emails there is a document with all the questions in. In the emails, Outer Limits, I sent a list of useful documents for Arts Council applications. So there's a really great guide from Common. So there are a couple of really great resources from working class focused organisations to help people write applications. And there is a document there, I think from Uncultured. There's a document there which lists all the questions in a Word document. Yeah,
there's a couple of producers that have been making templates for ages, but no one has made a new one. So I just took
whiz this around. If you give it to me, that would be great, Guleraana.
Yeah, sure.
I thought it was the Uncultured one I was looking at, actually. So whether or not I was, but this is as clear as I've seen anything.
This is exactly the questions that appear on Grantium. So, yeah, obviously short of the budget table. Okay, so great, we're on time. What I need to do now is, right, what we're going to do now is we're just going to have we're going to try and look at Richard's application and begin to start sort of looking at how we might answer the actual questions with the information that he's provided in this document, which hopefully you'll be able to see in a second.
I'm going to take notes.
Sorry, my computer's been dodgy all day. Right, there. Can we see that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. So, the first question that Richard's answered is, what is your show about? So we've got quite a lot of information here, which is great. And then we go on to why is it relevant? And the first question on the project grant is, oh, it's not going to have fun doing this, is it? Right, what can I close? We'd like to know what your project is, what will happen, and who it's aimed at. So I wonder, instead of flitting back and forth and going through the whole thing, do you think, Richard, that you want to try and answer that question, or maybe talk about it, and as a group we try and answer this in 600 characters, and we'll just leave it there and then we can come back to it at the end? So what I want you to focus on is, what are you asking for? What's the story? And who it's for?
As long as everybody's happy to be concentrating on this one of mine, yeah, I think it's good to show everybody else how it happens. So you mean based on what I've already written?
You can ignore what you've already written and just speak from the heart if that's easier.
Well, I think from earlier the conversation, I said what your project is. Does that mean that it's a research and development, or does that mean that it's about 1962?
So it's the activity, it's what you're asking for. The to put it this way, I always start with the grant will fund, and then I take that bit out if I need more characters back.
Okay, so the grant will fund research and development for a new play with music.
Mm-hmm. How, remind me how to spell your last name? M-O-S? No.
M-A-R-G-R-A-V-E, Margrave.
I thought it was Musgrave, sorry, Margrave, right. So what we would like to do is we'll fund a research and development phase. Let's not refine, let's get everything out. Okay, great. Tell me about the play.
Right, it's a bit difficult to do. Return to new play with music by Richard Morrow. The play is set in 1962 against the backdrop of the Cold War. Set in South Yorkshire in 1962.
Yep.
Against the backdrop of the Cold War.
Set in South Yorkshire, was it?
Yeah, specifically South Yorkshire.
Right, so anytime you use the phrase against the backdrop of, what you want to do is tell the story within the story. So what's the story that's set against the backdrop of the Cold War? Is it a love story? Is it like a family story?
It's a mixture
what's
of
going on?
Simply tonight, we could just call it a love story. It's a love story set against, or it's a family. It's what I'm trying to do is put a lot in like that. It's a love story, but it's a family crisis. It's a young woman's ambition to get on. It's all kind. I don't know how we describe it actually in this regard.
I think it's good to put character in, so let me look.
Okay, well, Claire's the character.
Oh, here we go. This is a nice little story there. Pieces about the relative innocence of living under the deadly threat of nuclear war during the Cold War. Oh, here we go. That's a lovely sentence. So this is why, when you've done all the hard work, you can then start to copy and paste. There you go.
And I had actually written that, hadn't I?
So let's read that out. The grant will fund research and development of a new play with music by Richard Margrave. Red Snow is a family drama, a love story set in a South Yorkshire mining community during the Cuban Missile Crisis in September 1962. Lovely. Who's it aimed at? I mean, you've already written that, so I could just take it instead of forcing you to...
Yeah, you make me try and think about a better way of doing it, and I've already written it. I'd written a better way than I was thinking. So who is it aimed at? Where was that?
Who's it for? Here we go. Plays for theatre audiences in South Yorkshire. Other former mining regions in the UK wide.
I basically see it as a regional touring play, but with a particular interest in South Yorkshire and Scotland and Wales, you know, and the Midlands.
Okay. Right. The aim is for the final production to tour to audiences in South Yorkshire and other former mining regions in the UK. Let's put that, okay? It's really important that you let the Arts Council know that you're not just having a little frolic with their money, and that actually there is set end goals. So stating that the final production is going to tour and to really specific areas is a big plus, because it's not just you having a jaunt for a week with your mates and all taking £500 for the privilege. It's actually progressing towards a final product that's going to serve underrepresented communities. So I think that's a solid intro. Let's check how many characters it is. It's always fun when you're like, how many? So we're at just over halfway. My feedback on this little section so far would be, what does the research and development mean? So what do you envisage? What do you see?
Well, in reality, it's half written. So it's more writing based on, since I've written, I've located other people to talk to who had played key roles in this period, including the pilot of one of the bombers. So I want to have time and space and money to actually go and interview them, get in touch with them properly. So that's on the kind of research side. On the musical side is the big area that I need to research and do. I've researched what I think I would like the songs, the music to be, but I need to discover how to access working with people. Does that come in this section?
Yep.
I mean, 1962 is really interesting because it's just before an awful lot of things. So it's as if people don't expect an awful lot. It's like, and that's why the idea of a band that's developing in the background of this is so lovely, because it's before the kind of Beatles that everybody got going. Well, they just about got going at that point, I think. But I think the musical side of it needs some research, it needs some development, and eventually it needs some musicians to work with.
Great. So we're going to break this up. So the grant will fund research and development of a new play with music by Richard Margrave. Red Snow is inspired by the testimony of someone who worked with nuclear bombers and missiles during the time, which is a sentence that you've written in the other document that you sent me. I think that's important to put in, because then what you want to do is you want to draw on real life testimonies. So development will include time for Richard to interview.
Yeah, yeah.
Who are you interviewing? Sorry, my...
Well, it's at the moment it's a couple of people that were actually involved with this particular RAF base, which was called Finningley. So it's a member of air crew, and it's a ground crew person. I don't know how we... I may find others though. When you start these projects, you then find that they say, talk to so-and-so. So how do we... I know that happens.
Let's do that. To conduct interviews as research, as well as, okay.
Yeah, for instance, I've been offered access to the people who ran CND at the time, those that are still alive, which is few actually.
Okay.
But they're not me making it up. They're actually real. I've already got the real contacts. It's not, you know. So I don't know how we managed to get that across as well.
I mean, this is why it's difficult and complicated, right? Let's check how many characters we've got. 565. So immediately we're teetering on the edge. Who? This is where we should put, is there anyone supporting you?
No, I've had the idea to, no, not at the moment. That's one of the questions.
Okay.
I've not, it came to me that Cast in Doncaster may have good connections with the Queen's Theatre. So I'm not sure, would it be something like that?
Right, let's just pop it in there, and then that will be one of your jobs to contact.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is 634, which with my little trick you can get away with, because it's up to 200 characters more. So I'll read it out, and then as a group we can assess what we think of it. Please give us a short summary of your project. The grant will fund research and development of a new play with music by Richard Margrave. Red Snow is a family drama, a love story set in a South Yorkshire mining community during the Cuban Missile Crisis in September 1962. It is inspired by the testimony of someone who worked with nuclear bombers and missiles during the time. The process will include time for Richard to conduct interviews as research, as well as develop original songs with professional musicians. The aim is for the final production to tour to audiences in South Yorkshire and other former mining regions in the UK. The project is supported by Cast Doncaster. Thoughts?
Brilliant from me.
Yeah, it's incredibly clear about what's going on. And it's to the point, but it still explains enough.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not bad for 10 minutes. What I would say is, these would be my notes if I was reading this, is why relevant, which you can probably do in like a couple of words, and then also character story. So instead of like Red Snow is a family drama, a love story, I might put in Claire, the protagonist, and maybe what her journey is, if I can capture that in just half a sentence. But this is how it works. It's really slow. You splurge something and then you're like, okay, what's missing? How do I tackle that? And then you come back to it. And this is why you agonize and spend weeks doing it, but it's fine. I mean, we're halfway there because there's, you know, I've got all of this to work with. So actually, if Richard had come to me and been like, can you take this and turn it into a cohesive application, I probably could do quite quickly. It's just empowering you guys to be able to do that for yourselves. But you've just seen, like, it didn't, like, once you've got the information and once you know what, once you know what the product is, actually it's quite simple to drill down to the nuts and bolts. And some tips I would say is, like, I would take out and put in an ampersand. I'd take out commas, just claw back characters wherever you can, literally, because 600 gets done really quickly. Okay, we're gonna say, Richard, that you're asking for 15,000 just because. Do you have personal access needs? Well, actually, don't have to if you don't. I was just gonna say you don't have to say that if you don't want to. So we're gonna leave that blank, and then the project start date, we're just gonna say, what's 2 months from now? 4th of August, so September, October. So let's say 10th of October, 2020. And you're gonna be all wrapped up by the end of the year?
I think it would take longer than that.
Yeah.
But part of the research and development is to hopefully be able to have workshops. Maybe there'll be Zoom things, but I think it would take longer than that.
Okay.
But not too long, we hope. But
let's give yourself 6 months, which is absolutely fair. Okay, fine. So that's all really simple. So tell us about you or your organization's relevant work and experience, which we had.
This is the embarrassing bit.
No, I mean, here we go. I'm going to take all of that. I'm going to pop it here, and then we're going to check how many characters it is. 2005. So there's some whittling down that you can do there. And then what I would say, my feedback would be, if you were to get a partner support, no, that goes in. Do you know what? This is all about you. You can wax lyrical about yourself up to the tune of 1,700 characters. What I would say, let me give you these notes, is artistic merit, producery bits, right? If there's anything that you've done that's producery, and that doesn't have to be like theatre or anything that feels directly relevant. So your journalist, writer, public affairs is really relevant specifically to this piece. So I would just add in a little bit about how that relates to what you're working on. But otherwise, this is it's long, but it's perfect. You've talked about all aspects of your work, so that's great.
What does artistic merit actually mean then?
So that means your credits.
Credits?
Yes. Okay. So this section here, like everything that you've done, as in that has been on stage, And then, so I'll give you an example. So you've got development work, you've got credits, you've got, I might talk, if I was writing about, if I was doing an individual grant, I would still talk about the work that I've done with the Thelmas. I might talk about work that I've done for other big organizations. I would definitely add in any project management work experience that you have, or anything that relates specifically to the themes of the play. So for example, when I wrote Santi Naz, I'd already done 1 semester of BA history in partition studies, which is from another project. But the point is that I had the relevant experience to write that play. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the big one. Tell us more about your project and what you want it to achieve. We want to know what you aim to do and why, including the ideas behind your project, right? So again, this is threefold. So this is basically what and why, right? So this is the relevance section comes in, for sure, because that's why. And you can talk you can talk about all of this in here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put it in, and then I'm going to make little cuts or move things around. So we're going to start with this, because that's what it is. Red Snow is a full-length play with 8 songs with parallel community and educational resources concerning the current nuclear. Right, that's brilliant, actually. And I think, sorry, I missed that paragraph. I think there's an element of what's here that can go in the first
Yeah, there is,
because that's what that's doing, is relating the past to the present, which is what you want to show. You want to show relevance. I think I'm going to highlight this, is what I'm going to do. And I'll tell you why I'm going to highlight it, because I think this bit comes in later, because for your R&D, it's not the focus, but with a full production, it would be. Yeah?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is at the end, I'm going to add, I'm going to add this in. A full production of Red Snow would be okay. I'll the parallel community and educational resources. Sorry, let me ask a question again. The current nuclear environmental threat, the destruction of mining communities in Thatcher's Britain, and hopes and aspirations for those recovering localities today. Is that what the play is about, or what the parallel community and educational resources is about?
That's what the parallel community and education resources are about.
Great. But I think there's an element of that that needs to make it into what the play is about as well, maybe. But that whole thing, if you've got space, which I would say...
The play is very much about the threat to the miners even then. So...
Okay. Well, it's a working document. I think, as we said, the more you write about the more you write the application, the more you learn about your piece. Yeah. So I would make space for this, because I think this is important. And this will come up in the public engagement section next. And that's where really your piece comes into its own. So it's a play about the past that has direct relevance to how we're living today, and actually raises awareness of certain issues. So whilst that's not the focus of your R&D, it is something that will be on the plate. So not only is Arts Council, so what they're doing is they're funding a banging performance, but also it will allow you to come up with all of this other stuff as well. Does that make sense to everyone else? Great. Okay, I'll try and pick up the pace, sorry. What I would do if my computer decided to not. There we go. Right. Coming of age story of you. Okay, so this is a lot of plot, right? And I think what you can do is definitely condense this, but I think absolutely what you need is the politics. You need the character. Okay, hang on, let me break this down. You need the character and story, relevance, and the politics, which I guess is the same thing, but does that make sense to everybody? I'm seeing a little furrowed brows, sorry. I'm complicating myself. Okay, I think trying to do that all right now is going to be tricky and a waste of time. So I'm just going to leave that bit if everyone understands what they think that section will involve. Yeah? Okay. What I would say to you, Richard, is this bit about the live band is important. So make sure that gets done. Okay, tell us how this project will develop your work. That is just absolutely what it says on the tin. The R&D will allow me to finish the piece. I will connect with different artists. I will connect with a major regional venue. I mean, literally, that you can just do that. It just be bullet points.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be any more complicated or highbrow than that. Let's be really honest. If this is if doing this piece of work is going to transform your career, tell them it's going to transform your career, but tell them why. And tell them why that's important. Why that is important is that you've already had one career. This is you taking everything you've experienced and everything that you're passionate about and doing something different with it.
Yeah.
It's bringing a new voice into the theatre industry, one that's not dictated by age, not to be offensive, Richard. You know, and it has particular relevance to today. So it's going to establish you as an emerging writer. That's literally what you need to do. Okay, who else is involved? I mean, unless there's any particular questions, I'm just going to gloss over this section because I think it's really self-explanatory. What I will say is, how will they contribute to the project? Big them up. So if they're a history consultant, tell them exactly what they're going to do is they're going to bring credibility to the work. They're going to make sure that the work is fact checked. They're going to make sure that it's of the highest standard, right? And I think that's fair. That's what consultants are for. In business, you would hire a consultant. There's no reason why you wouldn't hire a history consultant for a history play. And in the same way that I was saying this last time, like an intimacy coordinator, if you have got a piece that has a lot of sexual intimacy in it, if you are working with trauma, your counselor or your psychotherapist, those are all involved. They are key partners, but not like partner organizations. They're key people, let's just say that. So they need to go in here. And they basically bring legitimacy to your work. So I would say that. And I would say don't be scared of putting fancy roles in there. There's no reason why. You can't. Okay. Right. Public engagement. This is the beast. So this is your, who is it for? Okay. I would bullet point this. Right. Audiences include. So this is people who come to see the work. Audience segments. People who participate in workshops / engagement. And they're your participants. And if you do this section right, this will help you fill out the table in the next section.
Yeah.
Okay, so audiences include working class, non-traditional, theatre goers, ex-mining families. Well, who else?
Well, I've put in the international because we mentioned international, but
Fans of musical theatre.
yeah, and just a normal theatre audience too. I try and pitch it as an audience that a regional theatre would attract.
Okay, we can put region. Let's do. I would say up to 3, right? And then you can choose what I've just put words in your mouth, whichever is relevant. And what you want to do is you want to say why. Why they'll come. Give me 1 second. You're going to have to look. Ignore me. Right. Oh yes, participants. Here, great. So I'm gonna highlight this for a second, right? And then, because we can talk about that. Because we haven't mentioned any international involvement earlier. So that's why I'd be wary of adding it. What I might do is put the final production.
Well, it was a late idea for me too, because
I think it's a good one. My brain is slightly like, there's a lot of information right now. So my brain is a bit like, I kind of want to use it, but also I'm also really wary of the fact that it's a big jump from not having finished the play to then talking about international audiences. So I wonder if it's in the first section we add something like, obviously this has international resonance.
Let me just say why I think it popped up last Friday in the Heat. I've been thinking about this play for a very long time, and it's got an American and Russian thing with it, because America controlled our nuclear weapons, still do, and the Russians were either the aggressors or the targets. And I suddenly thought about something like Hamilton. I thought, wait a minute, why not look at the American side of this and be a bit richer in the experience of it, and think about what ordinary people in America felt at that time, And so that, and I've got a link with a theatre producer in Newark, New Jersey, and I know that that's a very diverse community, and I just thought that would be a really wonderful way to move it. And then similarly, no one ever really talks about what ordinary Russian people thought, whether they were allowed to think at that time. And so I've got a very good contact in St. Petersburg who could quickly get me in touch with people there to talk to. So it's a bit more R&D, isn't it, in a way? That's what came out of the hot afternoon last Friday.
No, that's.
I think throwing the kitchen sink actually is a good idea at the beginning. I think refining it tonight, I can see how you're doing it. You know, it's.
No, but I think there's a really good point in that actually this is the R&D.
Yeah.
And this is the final project.
Yeah.
So I think let me say that okay, great. What I would say for you, if you were filling this out right now for an R&D, I would find a way of including that international aspect in that beginning section and every other section, because it's actually an integral part of the R&D. And then in this section, I would put R&D participants include, and then put the, I'm sorry, I keep pointing at my screen and you can't see what I'm pointing at. I would put, like, condense this obviously.
Yeah.
And put that there. And then audiences for the final production, I would choose 3 of those audience segments. And then I would say why. So ex-mining families, I wouldn't put obviously, but I would put protagonist. I also wouldn't put this, but my brain has stopped working. That's who the characters are. I would find a more eloquent way of saying that you want the audience to reflect who's on stage and vice versa. So that's why that's an audience segment. Fans of musical theatre, it's got music in it. I mean, like, it's literally self-explanatory. So I would put the segments and then maybe a short sentence as to original songs. Yeah. History buffs, not a moment of history that we see on stage, something like that. And then in 1,000 characters, I would play around with that, and I think you've got plenty. But that's a really good point that it raises, that actually sometimes your participants and your audience for your R&D are going to be very different to your final production. So if you've got space, I would add both of them in, just because, again, it shows that long-term thinking for the Arts Council. Okay. How will people engage with your project, and what experience do you want them to have? So this is really simple, to the point where it's just like, is this actually what they want you to say? So what do you want your audiences to do? We want, and I'm putting words in your mouth so you can change this, audiences and participants to understand the effects of history on the modern day. That's it, in much more eloquent words and however you want to say it, right?
Yeah.
So the fact is the impact of a global event, global, you can see my decline now, can't you? The impact of a global event on climate change, blah, 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 blah. Like, whatever you feel those themes are and how they're impacting 2020, that's what you outline there. How are they going to engage is that they're going to participate in the R&D, they're going to watch the final performance, and they're going to take workshops. And what I would do is, again, just add in a couple of sentences of what that involves or entails. So you might have collaboration, skills share, etc. Watching the final performance, how do you want the audience to feel? What do you want them to take away? So feel, take away, And then the workshops, what the learning outcomes of your workshops are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, very much so.
And then if there's any like charity partners, less so for this, but for example, if it was a show about domestic violence, taking into consideration the last project that we did, so it might be that you're like vulnerable women might be empowered after taking a workshop and seeing their experiences reflected on stage. Does that make sense? So like really hone down on what are people going to take away from seeing your show? Like what's the point? Why are they coming? What are they going home with? How have they changed? All the stuff that you would think about with a character when you're doing character development. Think about your participants and your audience like that. Okay, oh God, right. Tell us how you'll make sure your project reaches people. Marketing. That's basically what this is. Okay, so this is where you might talk about your partner organization. So you want to list all of their social media followers. You want to list networks. So any networks that you have, journos, history buffs, and then split the segments up and how you will approach them. So for example, one of your segments is history buffs. People who are interested in history, how might you reach them?
That's a good question.
Older people, generally print marketing works. You could sign up for with PR, like I would put that all in. But I would also think about like where, you know, the Cuban Missile Crisis, God, I'm sure there's a whole bunch of people that are really fanatical about that one global event. Like that's just how people are. So you might find online forums that you go and market to, like all that kind of stuff. Is there a university or a school network that you could market to? Like all those, education. Because that's why sorry, you've already done this work. How will you reach them? Right, all of this stuff that you wrote here, that goes into that bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I found some organisations that should be really good to work with, actually.
Yeah, and then also so the cast, right? And then all of these trusts that will go in there. You run a playwriting group, so all of those members and anyone on the alumni or whatever, like that all goes into this section here.
Okay.
Does that make sense to everybody? So it's you personally as an artist and who your networks are, the networks that your any partners bring to you, and then also think about your play or your project in themes and then how you target those themes. So if your piece is about, like if it's an LGBT piece, then like all of the LGBT activist accounts on Twitter, I'd be like hitting them up and be like, hey, can you retweet this? All of the sort of like different intersections of identity under the LGBT plus banner, like I'd find a website for them and I would email them, be like, hey, there's a really great show that I think you're your audience might engage with. That's basically audience development, and that goes in here. Does that make sense to everybody? We're moving really slow, but also really fast at the same time. I appreciate that. This is where you just chuck numbers out of box. Like, obviously it's got to be grounded in some truth, but just some numbers. Like, how many people are working your R&D? So you've got 5 musicians, you've got 5 actors, that's already 10 people. Then you've got you've got a director, that's 12 artists. Yeah, if you've got a history consultant and a socialism consultant, so that's 14 people. Boom. And you commit to running 5 workshops with 20 people in them, that's 100 participants. I mean, the audience, normally you'd be like, okay, so I'm going to do it in the studio theatre, there's 15 people, there's 50 seats, we're going to sell at 50% capacity for 5 nights, that's 25 times 5, that's 100 audience live. But I'm going to go on BBC London and 100,000 people are going to hear me talk about my work. So that's how that goes. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And then the Grantium will make that sum up for you. You don't have to do it.
Grantium adds that up.
Yeah, Grantium adds up. That's the only nice thing it does for you.
I think actually a lot of the thinking behind that Grantium site, if that's what happens.
Oh my God. Okay, this is all really self-explanatory, but what it should do is prompt you to think about where your money's coming from, how much in kind you're getting, from which places, what can you beg, borrow and steal, what can you sort of like repurpose in terms of, say, I'm going to keep going back to the history consultant. Say a history consultant is going to read your script and give you some feedback. That's half a day's work. Their day rate is £350. You split that in half and whack that on your in-kind support and your budget.
Okay.
Yeah. You're going to send it to me, to dramaturg. I take 2 hours prep and an hour face-to-face, so that's half a day. My daily rate is 300, so that's £150 in kind. That's basically how you add it up. You're going to get marketing support from the Queens because they're really nice like that. So you're going to spend a couple of hours talking to their marketing person, being like, okay, so we'll put this out on our Twitter and this is what we expect you to do. Their daily rate is 150, so you put in £150 in your in-kind support, and then suddenly your match funding, although the new guidance is that you don't need 10% cash anymore. So what you need to do is bump up that in kind, basically. And if you can chuck a couple of £100 out of your own pocket in cash, I would do. I would fudge the budget so you can make it back, but I would at least say that I'm putting money out of my own pocket into it. Is there any questions about this section? I think that's easier instead of me just chucking statements at you. Okay, so what's really frustrating but also helpful about Grantium is that you essentially enter it line by line. So you might say writer's fee is £1,200, you just write that in under artistic cost. And then it works out, and then you do the reverse for what you're, so sorry, let me start again. You enter your, Doug, is it income first or expenditure first? I can't remember. It doesn't really matter. You're muted.
It's income.
It's income.
Yeah.
So that is actually helpful. So then you put your income first and then it populates your total income, and then basically every line that you add in of expenditure, it takes it away. And what's really good about Grantium now is, since they updated it in like February 2018, it will not let you progress to the end unless your budget is balanced. Whereas previously, it just let you submit it if your balance wasn't if your budget wasn't balanced, and then they'd be like, nope. So you wasted all that time, and they would reject you when it was just a really simple mistake that they could have flagged up. So now they do that. So yeah, it's simple, money in, money out. And then you tell them how you've worked your costs out. So if you're buying equipment, you can say, I checked the Apple website, a new computer costs £2,500. So that's why that's in there. If you're paying everybody at an ITC weekly rate, then you would put that in. You put support in kind. Tell us how you will manage the budget for this project and about your previous experience of managing budgets. If you have never managed a budget in your life, I mean, I feel like that is nigh on impossible, right? For those of you that run organizations, you're managing budgets on a regular basis. If you are on the production side, then maybe you will have worked to a budget before. Like if you're a set designer and you've worked with a small company and they've gone, you've got 500 quid, then that's managing a budget. I would put it in. There's nothing that can't be turned around to look fancy. So for example, the first time I completed this, I had managed budgets before, but I just like beefed up my experience. Or what you can do is you can put it all on your project partner. So you might say that actually I'm going to give all the money to the Queens and they're going to manage it for me, which is a big ask for them, but it is something that you could do. Or you could say there's another organization that's going to help me, and you're going to learn from them. So you positively spin it as in, this is my first time managing a budget of this size and I will do it in collaboration with so-and-so. This is experience that they have, this is experience I have, and this is what I hope to be able to do once the project is over. And that actually funds your development as well, which is what they want to see. Oh God, so close to the end, guys. Stay with me. Your partner's recent experience in managing similar types of projects. So anyone who's had a day job and you've managed a project, put the information in. It doesn't matter whether you've managed kids at schools, that's project management. Doesn't matter if you like work as a PA and do project management. All of it's relevant, put it in. And totally, if you've got a big partner, put all of their information first. Planning. Do not say that you have cast the show if you want to be paid for casting, because anything that goes in here cannot be included in your budget, right? So planning to date, Richard, might be that I've written half of a script. I have contacted potential creatives that I would like to work with. I have reached out to my contacts internationally and we have discussed collaborating. So any prep work that you've done goes in there, and like be really specific. If there's like loads of little things that you've done, just write them down, even if it's just for a sense of accomplishment. I'm like, oh my God, look how much work I've already done. And conversely, if you're going for an R&D and you really don't know that much about the project, I would address that earlier in your application, but I would also really think about nothing comes from nowhere. So if you've got a project idea, where did that come from? So how did you get to the place that you are? Did you just read a whole bunch of books? Did you watch an entire series of Netflix and make notes? Like those are all the little things that show them that this is already a thing that's happening and that you've already thought about it, and you're not their first port of call just asking for money to play with, because that's not what they want. That's what developing your creative practice is. For this is, there has to be a specific thing that you're working on. Does that make sense? Cool. And the project timeline is just really sodding boring, in like you line day by day, line by line, put in all the major things that need to be done. So that's things like casting. That's things like preparing marketing materials, if that's part of your project timeline. For R&Ds, it will be less so. It might be, if you're working with a dramaturg, it might be writing deadline 1, dramaturgy session 1, writing deadline 2, dramaturgy session 2. So just break down your entire process. And then tell us how you evaluate your project. They want quantitative and they want qualitative data. So that might be feedback forms. It might be audience data if you're on a proper tour. But yeah, it might be video diaries. It might be the director will keep a blog. Just show them that you've thought about how you're going to evaluate your project, basically. Does that make sense? And that's what we've done. We sort of veered away from Richard's, but then I was like, it's just too much. I can't write an entire application in 2 hours.
Oh, you did brilliantly. It was great.
I think you did amazingly.
That's the unconscious.
It'd be really great too, because we've got a few minutes left, but are there any questions? But also I'd love to know how people, because obviously people are coming from different places, and it's great, Guleraana, because you picked up things as we went along. Where are we now at the end of the session compared to where we were at the beginning? What's useful and what might be, because obviously I might be meeting some of you in one-to-one sessions, what might be things that we can think about, or where you want to be, what's the next part of your journey in relationship to writing an application? Go on, Lee, where are you at?
So my thing at the moment is obviously where the Habit Factory has been doing that so far for 10 years. It's answering the question of why now?
I think I've got some answers for you on that, actually. I think we should, we'll have a chat.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's probably about, Guleraana said at the beginning, organisational development.
Yeah.
And maybe a bit about your practice, which, you know, I think that might be about, you could partner up. You could get a mentor from maybe Company 3 or Chicken Shed, or like a company that's really has a national reputation that's doing similar stuff to you. You know, I think that could be about a bit of dreaming, like what's your next stage? Because I think it's really valuable, isn't it?
And a lot of it is about understanding, like terms of pay rates and stuff like that. I think I've completely undervalued myself for a very, very long time.
Well, this is the moment.
To be honest with you, I have no idea what I'm worth.
But we can help you with that.
And that's all stuff that before I can even, and I do, as you was going through it, Guleraana, I was writing a lot of like notes and stuff, just stuff that you were saying that would be relevant to me. But yeah, before I go further with that, I think there's a lot of questions that I need answering myself in terms of what is everything worth, what are creatives worth,
But I can help you with that as well. You don't have to do that on your own, because that can be a bit overwhelming.
Yeah, and I think there's like, having just done, so my company got 35 grand, like the top ask, in emergency funding from Arts Council. And we did that thing of like, do we ask for less money because it's more likely to get it? And the fact is that it costs what it costs, right? And Arts Council want to give you money right now, and they want to pay freelancers, and they want you to pay yourselves properly. So you're actually doing yourself a disservice by paying yourself less, because they'll look at your budget and be like, but where's the writer fee? Where's the producer fee? If it's an organizational development, who's not getting paid that should be getting paid, right? So like, I hear you. I just think work with Doug and find out what those rates are and set them for yourself.
Yeah, that's super. Yeah, and thanks very much for going through everything and just giving the notes, because it was nice to write stuff down to be able to make them relevant to me.
Brilliant.
Sharon, where are you?
So thank you, first of all. This has all been super, super helpful, and it's also made it seem a lot more achievable. and like something that I could do. So I think for me next, it would be deciding on which of the 2 projects I would be working on, which one I'd want to go ahead with, and also the long run for it as well, like thinking, okay, well, I've written this, but who is it for? Why can I get money for it? And it's also actually been really helpful hearing you talk, and it's made me see one of my projects in a complete different light as well, and something else that I could do with it when you're talking about community. And because one of the pieces I've written is all female, and it's about mental health, and it's just given me some new ideas what I could do with it actually. So that's really helpful. So yeah, so for me next, I think I just need to work out which one I want to go with, who's it for, and then same as Lee as well, understanding money. I've never dealt with budgets or anything, so understanding who gets what and how much, and yeah. So I think it's given me a lot to think about.
There are some, you can dig them out, can't you, with in ITC. Is that what do you use the ITC rates, Guleraana? Yeah, so the independent theatre, well, I can't remember what it stands for.
Independent Theatre Council, yeah. ITC have rates cards, which are normally a weekly minimum. So you can follow the in the room payment, which is essentially what we do for R&Ds, which is a weekly minimum. So if you've got a 1 week R&D, everybody gets paid the same. So that's the writer, the director, or the cast, the tech, whoever's in the room gets paid the ITC minimum, which I think is $4.98, which is not a lot of money, but if you've got room, you can put it up. But yeah, that's the best option.
Great advice. Rachel, where were you at?
So I can answer pretty much all of that. I've got experience with quite a lot of the stuff that you went through. I just don't have anyone I'm working with. So the only thing I need to do now is start sending messages out to people and to try and get people on board. But I've done budgets. I've got loads of credits. I've worked loads of places. I just haven't got anyone to actually work with me on this. And it's like I have started to talk to people, but I haven't found anyone I really want to work with yet. So I've just got to do that.
Great.
The thing is, that could take so long, couldn't it? So is there no point of submitting one without anyone? Like,
no, I'd say so. I would do that speculative thing. I'd set yourself a time scale, being like, I'm going to submit at August. So I'd say I'm going to submit in September, and I would start emailing people, DMing them and being like, hey, I've got an idea. Are you interested? Find out what their fees are.
mm-hmm.
And then set a deadline. Be like, I know it's short notice, but I want to put an application in. Can you let me know by so-and-so? And like basically send that out to loads of people. So then what you can do is if people don't get back to you, you've got backups, and then name them. And as I said earlier, if they don't come through, you can just change them. You won't get your money until you've got a set confirmed list of artists, but at least that buys you time.
Sure. I've definitely got actors. I just don't have any other like creatives, basically. So that's the next thing I need to do. Otherwise, I think I can do that.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
No worries.
And if you want to chat about creatives, then I can maybe point you in the direction of something.
Awesome. Thank you.
John, where are you?
So I was also making notes, and thanks very much. I was kind of changing bits that I'd already written and just highlighting bits. So yeah, I think I need to crack on with the sections that I can write, because there are definitely things that I can write, and then I can get other people that I know to take a look at them and maybe talk to Doug if you're available as well. And I sort of made a list as well while I was there, because I said at the start about directors and trying to get those other creators involved. And I think what my fault, if you like, is I often go to one person and I wait for that person to come back, and then I go to the next person, and it just takes forever. And I hate the idea of kind of asking several people the same thing and then having to pick one. But I think I just need to get on with that really, and approach some of the people that I have worked with before and just say, if it's not for you, do you recommend anyone else in this field that this might appeal to? And try and use their networks, because I should have a huge network really. I'm just not very good at tapping into it.
Just make sure they're not all men.
No, well, and I think I've sort of made notes on that, and that's one thing I'm really conscious of is in a lot of my writing projects, is trying to find trying to add that diversity. As I think I said in one of the last sessions that I was in this embarrassing situation where I pitched the show for Mercury Musical Development with a show that's covers areas of diversity, and it's particularly about, it's sort of almost about a migrant journey as well in this show. And then I pitched it with a fully white cast because they were the names of people who were given to me from, I did try, but the people I knew just kept throwing more and more white names at me, and that's who I ended up with. And I can't do that with this project show. I need to find those partners who can help me find the different voices.
I think, making sure that you have diversity. I mean, that's like gender, that's also around ethnicity, but it's hard work. It's really easy just to rely on your close network. And of course you want people in there that you can trust as well, but you just have to work hard. But it's the brilliant thing about having diversity within a company is it makes the work better.
Yeah.
Because if we all think the same, you just got loads of people like you who think the same. It's just good. Why have them there in the room? That's the collaboration of having lots of different people and experience in the room is really exciting. It's really brilliant. Makes you a better artist as well. And that might be one of the arguments. What will I get from this?
Well, and I have sort of tried to work that into what my development path is really. In terms of actually getting different voices and possibly even pitching for, I think the show's kind of written for 5 actors to play maybe up to 23 parts. But actually for the R&D, I'd like to have 6 actors so that I can play with the genders over the roles and kind of decide. It's all pretty fluid anyway, to be honest. Any of the parts could be played by anybody.
What you just said there, John,
play with that.
Sorry to interrupt. What you just said there, I think that needs to go into your section. As in, like, this is a real time for me to play with actors and really learn more about, who, and like, you could be really honest, like break down some of my unconscious bias about what actors can play what roles. And I really want to like throw that all out the window and experiment with 6 diverse actors. And I think even then, if you only got a couple of names, the fact that you're committing on paper to doing that is a really strong case for them to fund that.
Yeah.
And it's not diversity for diversity's sake. It's you genuinely wanting to like enhance your practice by having people who are different to you in a room.
Yeah, and I think even with with some of the music things that I've written, I know that I need that brought into it. It's I'm trying to write a song that's in a particular style, but actually I need people who really understand that style to come in and do that with me. They can take the idea and work with it, but it's
I think you'd have a really strong case if that's the story that you tell.
Okay.
There's like, we didn't talk about diversity, we didn't talk about creative case, we didn't talk about let's create, but I mean we could talk for days. It's just that should all inherently be part of your work, wanting to let communities who don't have access to the arts into the arts. That should be part of your practice. Opening up your rehearsal rooms to people who don't necessarily suit or what your typical notion of what a character looks like. That's all part of Let's Create. So as long as you're thinking along those lines, then you're going to be hitting them we're going to be hitting those targets without trying to hit those targets. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Thanks.
Great. And Richard, you've been the centre of the attention, so I think I've heard what you've taken away. Is there anything you want to add?
Well, like I didn't realise I was going to be as well. So sorry, everybody, that you had to go.
It's good. It's useful. It's really useful for everyone. Yeah.
Just while I remember, Guleraana, thank you so much for today. It was like magic. It was like all the stuff I'd done. You just suddenly I hope I can have a copy, please, of what you were doing.
Yeah, sure.
Your notes and everything, because that would be really helpful. There's only one thing that wasn't revealed about my application, which was my guesstimates of budget. So I think I'd like to talk about budget a bit in the future. maybe in the one-to-ones or whatever. But I found that really, it's self-worth as well, you know, because really it needs to be invested in me, so I do the writing and do the work. And I found it very difficult to just put down, that's what I want to do. So it was...
Well, do go to there are rates of pay, you know, that are established rates of pay for writers, directors, actors. So Independent Theatre Council, go use those as rates, or, you know, if the company rate is equal, you can establish a company rate from those ITC rates if you want to. But they exist. They're all things that you can look at.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you could just go rates of pay actors UK, and it will come up, because they're all established by the equity, by the union, by the various unions and organisations that represent creatives. So they're all there. They exist. So don't make anything up, because also you need to say this is based on, I have researched this. Yep.
Oh God. Right. I've just put the template that we were working on into the chat as a document. Sorry, and I checked my phone when I shouldn't have done. I've just realised that I missed a really, really big deadline.
Oh, have you? Oh God.
I was meant to submit Santi Naz for the Asian Media Awards, and I forgot to.
Oh no.
Oh.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's my bad.
So grab that template now if you haven't already.
Wait, it did something to my screen, so I'm going to try again.
I mean, I can add it to the next email as well. I've downloaded. Brilliant, amazing, thank you. It was, it felt effortless, Guleraana.
I haven't missed it, sorry.
Oh, hurrah, thank goodness. When do you get to do it by?
I'm going to do it tomorrow. It's due by the 21st of August.
Oh, right, thank goodness. Yes. Oof. I forgot what I was going to say now. No,
it's
just
fine. I mean, my brain's gone now.
Yeah. Thank you for making it. So it felt effortless and simple, which is exactly what we need.
Good.
And I think it's given everyone the confidence to be able to tackle it. Get on to Granty and get your profile sorted out, and just have a look through it before you attack it. Just have a look so you know what it's asking, so you don't get terrified by it when you've got your application.
Yeah, and it might take up to 10 days for your applicant profile to be approved. So just bear that in mind.
In advance, yeah. Amazing. Brilliant, thank you. Thanks very much. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you, Guleraana.
Much appreciated.
Very real pleasure. Brilliant. All right. Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.